Okay. Yeah, so if you didn't know how to spell my name, there it is. But of course you can find it on the website as well. But anyway, I've been doing this for, well, I've been teaching creation and evolution to our kids when they were teenagers, and because I want to make sure they have the message properly about the Bible, about creation. And we are fortunate, we are blessed that all of our kids are believers, and our grandchildren are being taught appropriately as well, including homeschooling. So I feel this is very important for the youth to know, the difference between creation and evolution and what evidence there is for creation. So I've given a course on creation and evolution. It's 16 lectures long. I've given them at different Bible schools overseas. And this talk here is essentially one of those lectures, but embellished with new information as we go. So you look at creatures out there, you wonder, how did they get here? Did they evolve from some other ancestor, living being, or the plants? Well, we're going to have a look at that. This is roughly what I'm going to cover. I call it God's incredible creatures. First of all, what does the Bible say? Well, the Bible is very clear in chapter 1 of Genesis. God created everything according to its kind. He says that 10 times. And mankind is also created. God spoke man into existence as well, separately, in the image of God. So every kind of animal reproduces according to its kind. So we're going to look at these creatures as we go through and ask the question, could these creatures possibly have evolved? Or do the creatures look like they are designed for a purpose? And if they are, then who is that designer? We'll ask the question, is evolution really true? And if there is a designer, is God that designer? Is God that creator? So we'll look at quite a few different ones very quickly. I always like to show this picture to when you ask, how did something come to be? There are always three explanations. One is it happened by chance. The water up on the seashore, it's going to drop the seashells and the stones wherever it will, but that's by chance. How about by law? If I step over this podium here, which way am I going, up or down? Down. The law of gravity is a law of nature that God created, and that we always go down. So, and there are many laws of nature, and they're all fixed laws of nature, as we see in the Bible and as we see by experience. And then if you can't describe it by one of these, chance or law, or some say necessity, then it's designed. It must be designed. If you look at the faces of those presidents on the rock, did that happen because the rain fell on the rock in a certain angle and it carved them out? I don't think so. It didn't happen by chance. There's some artist who planned those, how to carve them out of the rock, and then there's people that carved that stone. So it was done by design. So again, Genesis chapter 1, the word kind is used 10 times. It's used for plants and animals, and then especially for mankind. And it mentioned these different plants and animals, and of course they're very broad categories, but a kind is a kind. Cat kind, dog kind, cow kind, mankind, it's all kind. And one kind, we have no evidence from the Bible, we have no evidence from nature that one kind can transform itself into another one. So there are definite and distinct categories of living beings. The fossil record, what does that tell us? Now, I've just got a few slides on this. There's whole lectures on topics like this, but there's things like the Cambrian layer of rock, of sediments. It seems to appear that all the major phyla of different living organisms appeared in the bottom layer. That's not according to evolution. Evolution cannot explain that. Living fossils, the case of a fish that was thought to be extinct, went extinct 68 million years ago. The coelacanth is one that I mentioned. Well, 1938, a fisherman caught a coelacanth fish off the coast of Africa, and the structure is exactly the same as that of the fossil. So that didn't change. I mean, it didn't evolve. It's still the same. So there's a lack of empirical experience for transitions. You know, some people thought the birds evolved from a reptile. Well, this Archaeopteryx, you know, they found a few bones, fossils of that, but they didn't come anywhere close. I mean, they just found one or two that could be interpreted that way, but nothing close. Whale evolution, horse evolution has all been debunked. Inverted fossil orders. You know, you wouldn't expect you to find shells at the top of the highest mountains. How do they get there, except through a flood? I mean, you don't expect to find them there. And then, as far as human evolution is concerned, possibly, there is no credible ape-like human fossil identified so far. Many attempts. There's a whole book written on that. In fact, a number of books on that, which disprove any evolution of man. Here's a few quotes. This is from Ron West. He's an evolutionist. He says, contrary to what most scientists write, the fossil record does not support the Darwinian theory of evolution, because as this theory, there are several that we use to interpret the fossil record. By so doing, we are guilty of circular reasoning if we then say the fossil record supports this theory. Here's an evolutionist says, we can't find any evidence. And this is one from a creationist, Dr. Dwayne Gish. He's since passed on to be with his Lord and Savior. But he was a VP of ICR, and he was a creationist. He knew fossils and genetics very well. So he wrote a number of books. He wrote one book back in 1973 saying, evolution, the fossils say no. And then in 1985, he did more research and he wrote a second book called Evolution, the Fossils Still Say No. So he could not find any transitional forms where evolutionary theory predicts such forms should have been found. So, and there are no exceptions that he could find. So he did a very, very thorough research on that. Okay, so now we're going to walk through some incredible creatures. I'm not going to read all these words, but this is the ones that I'm going to go through very quickly and ask the question, is it possible that this animal could have evolved from some other animal that we know about? The cheetah, a cat, it can run up to 70 miles per hour over a distance 700 yards or more, reach 45 miles per hour in 2 seconds. Can your car do that? Well, maybe. Cheetah is the fastest land-able animal known, and here it is in running. So clearly, there is nothing that comes close to that. How could that evolve? I mean, that is created that way. And then you come to a very special animal. You recognize this one as the giraffe, 10 feet tall up to his shoulders, and then another 8 feet up to his neck, so 18 feet, and stretching maybe close to 20. He's got 7 neck bones, okay? And then he's got a very huge heart to deliver blood to the brain. We have to move blood about 2 feet. This has to move the blood, probably around 12 feet to get to the brain. So imagine the pressure that is involved in getting the blood to the brain. The lungs are about 8 times the size of a human, and they have a very slow air intake. So imagine if this giraffe biting from the trees and then all of a sudden dips down to try and get some water. He could be down 20 feet suddenly from reaching up to going down. If you move your head fast sometimes, you can feel that something's not quite right. Well, they have reinforced artery walls, bypass and anti-pooling valves, a web of small blood vessels, sensing signals, So this is engineered for survival. Can you see any other animal out there that looks anything like the giraffe that it could have evolved from? I don't think so. So it defies explanation by the evolutionists. And this sort of random, I go through these octopuses. There's an 8-armed octopus. You know, these are, again, very special octopuses. They can actually shoot ink blood at you. If anybody approaches it and they want to defend themselves, they can shoot this jet-propelled, and it can swim very fast. It shoots ink to create a smoke screen to dull the predator and also to hide where it is. So, and if it were to lose an arm, it could regrow it. So it's a very, very dynamic kind of an animal. There's and various varieties of them, of course. Here's another one. How many people have done any deep sea diving? How far can you go? 30 feet? 100 feet? Well, here's a Weddell seal, a very special. He can go underwater and stay there. You know, no air required for 45 minutes, and he can go down to 1,500 feet down. Can you imagine that? I mean, we couldn't even think about that. You know, imagine the pressure on the brain, on the whole body doing that in 45 minutes. I can't think of any animal that is anywhere close to that it might have evolved from. Here's one for fishermen. You'll like this here, the archer fish. It can shoot water 15 feet into the air and hit a bug. His mouth is at the surface of the water. His eyes are underneath the water, and yet he can shoot towards the bug. He can see through the water up into the atmosphere and shoot that bug and bring it down and eat it. And so here are just a few different pictures which show that. Very incredible creature. And then there's the decoy fish. There's a number of fish and other kinds of animals that can decoy, so act as a decoy. And this is one of them, the decoy fish. Lives in waters near Oahu in Hawaii. It uses a dorsal fin as a lure here because it can change that. It goes up and appears to be a separate smaller fish, complete with mouth and eye. It ceases its gill movements, remains still, stops breathing, and the lure turns into a dark, deep color, and so he's attracting, his what he's going to try and catch. The part attaching the lure to the fish body becomes transparent, and so it moves the decoy side to side, remaining still, and when his prey gets close enough, he grabs it. Very remarkable. And then there's the angler fish, and this is using lures to catch your fish. Well, here's how this fish tries to catch his prey. Uses a lure at the end of a movable fishing pole suspended over the mouth here, you can see here, and has a fishing rod coming out of its back with luminescent bulb at the end of it, and a deep sea angler with light bulb hanging from the roof of its mouth, dangling again, and then simulates the movement of a real shrimp. There's prey looking for a shrimp. Then it may move in quick backward darting motion. If bait gets nipped off, it grows back bait. In other words, if that lure gets bitten or his body gets bitten, it can grow back within a few days, fully replaced within 2 weeks. Nothing that I can think of that does that. Now here's one you've probably heard of, the CIC ADA insect, and Chicago, Illinois is well known for that. There are a number of different species of it, but one magic cicada can live underground for 7 to 17 years. In other words, hibernate underground. Does not bite or sting. It's not a pest. It makes a real racket when they emerge, because it's just isn't one of them emerging. It's a whole army of these insects that are emerging all at once. And they're very small in size. But that's their feature. You know, they can hide underground for that long of a period. Then we have a sea slug. It lives along the seacoast within the tidal zone. Feeds mostly on sea anemones. That is a plant, actually, that's in the sea. And anemones are equipped with thousands of small stinging cells on their tentacles. And cells explode at the slightest touch. In other words, if something gets near, they explode, they plunge the poison harpoons into the would-be intruder, and the spirit intruder is paralyzed and drawn into the anemone's stomach to be digested. Okay, then a sea slug, the sea slug is not stung. Its undigested stinging cells are swept along through ciliated tubes that are connected to the stomach and end in pouches. Stinging cells are arranged and stored in the pouches to be used for sea slugs' defense. Whenever attacked, the sea slug defends itself using those stinging cells. How do you explain that? Where did it come from? What's its ancestor? There's nothing that we know of. And then we have gardening ants. Ants are a very busy creature, as you probably know, and they gather in large groups. Here's a special one, the gardening ants, bull's horn acacia tree of South America, furnished with large hollow thorns. Okay, these are those thorns that are hollow, inhabited by ferocious stinging ants. You can see them sitting on here. And small bumps on the tree supply food to the ants. The tree receives complete protection from all animal predators and plant competitors, so they're protected. The ants viciously attack all intruders that come close to the tree, so they're really guarding that. And the ants are gardeners and nip off any green shoot that shows its head near their tree. So it's always on the lookout for food. But when all the ants are removed from one of these trees, either forcefully or that they decide to move, the tree dies within 2 to 15 months. So just to think of that, the tree depends on the ants, okay? But if the ants go away, you know, the tree is gone. So then, and that leads into symbiosis. There are certain animals that, and fish and birds that depend on each other to live. So certain fish feed on smaller fish and shrimp. And here's a big fish here. So they would feed on small fish and shrimp. But after eating, their mouths become littered with debris and parasites inside. So how do they clean it out? Well, they pay a visit to the cleaning station. What's the cleaning station? That's where the small fish gather. So when it opens its mouth and gill chambers, the little fish can swarm in there and clean out the parasites that had gathered. So the little cleaner fish and shrimp swim in and do their job, you know, cleaning out the mouth of the big fish, because the big fish couldn't survive very long if it kept on building up that debris. So it's what we call a win-win for both parties. The little guys get food, and the big guy gets his mouth cleaned out so it can live. And there are other animals like that. There's not just the fish, but also some birds are also dependent on things like that, and the crocodiles even, because you can imagine what the crocodile gathers. Then we have another special one, a water beetle. Okay, it swims or floats on top of the water, and so is very small. And if it's floating above the water, it could be a target for a predator. So how does it defend itself? Well, if it sees the predator coming, the beetle will propel itself forward out of the immediate danger. Okay, and then that movement and the detergent that he releases causes the surface tension of the water to break down. The surface tension is gone. So his predator, the guy that's coming after it, sinks down into the water. So that's how he defends himself against the predator. But you never thought of doing that. Okay, then we have come to some birds who migrate in you would say, an unbelievable distance and an unbelievable way. How can they do that? We're going to go through a bunch of them here. The white-throated warbler. Okay, it summers in Germany, in Europe, and then winters in Africa. So when it's born, when the little ones are born, the parents take off at the end of summer as the young birds become more independent. So they're still up in Germany. Their parents have gone to Africa. So these young birds take off a few weeks later, flying instinctively across thousands of miles of unfamiliar land and sea to rejoin their parents. How could they do that? Try that with your kids. So the brains of birds have inherited knowledge. Okay, they can tell latitude, longitude. I mean, it's a built-in navigation system that we can't even imagine how complex that is. So it can tell latitude, longitude, and direction by the stars. They have a calendar, clock, navigational data available to them, and that helps them to find where they're going. How that works, I have no idea, but they do. They make it work. Then there's the Alaskan golden plover, very, very small bird. Okay, born in Alaska, 26 days of incubation, and then again, the parents take off. After a few months, the parents fly to Hawaii. Okay, how far is that? 4,500 kilometers from Alaska to Hawaii. So how can they get there that far, flying all over water? No, there's no land involved. The average weight of this bird is 140 grams. But in order to fly there, they need to get some fuel. So what do? They add pounds. They eat, so they add another 70 grams of weight as fuel that they use as fuel. So with that extra fuel, they can start their journey. So it takes 88 hours to fly to Hawaii. So at a rate of 51 kilometers per hour, and it's all over open water without a break. It takes 250,000 wing flaps to get there. Just imagine the action. It flies through fog, rain, sunshine, starlight, overcast skies. It requires 0.6% of its body weight per hour to get there. So if you do the calculation, you'll find out if it were just go straight there by itself, all the fuel would be exhausted in 72 hours. But it takes 88 hours to get there. So what do? They fly in a V formation. And so they take turns being the lead, and the other ones hide behind the lead birds. So if you see flock of geese and other kind of birds going in a V shape, you know why they're doing that. But imagine there's such a small amount of fuel there. Other migratory feats, the Canadian golden plover bird travels 8,000 miles south from Hudson Bay, which is here. It crosses 2,000 miles of sea from Nova Scotia here to the Caribbean, and then winters in Argentina, and returns by way of the Central America and the Mississippi Valley. So it doesn't even go back the same route. It finds another route to get back to where it needs to be. So again, a very remarkable navigation system. The barn swallow migrates 9,000 miles from northern Canada to Argentina. And that would be straight from here, here down to Argentina. That's a long way to fly, but it does involve some land. The Arctic tern migrates 14,000 miles from pole to pole, North Pole to South Pole, and then back again. So all of these, they have a navigation system built into them, but they all do it in a different way. they go to a different place, they start at a different place, so magically they can do that. There's even whales and bats and salmon have navigation system built into them, so they can accomplish great journeys using their built-in navigation. So the evolutionist is baffled. How do you explain this? This remarkable ability cannot evolve piecemeal through mere chance. Okay, so how does the bird learn for the first time? It's the first time going from Alaska to Hawaii. Tries to go there, well, it can't quite get there. Halfway and it dies. Tries again, and next one tries again. So they die off if they can't get there, so how can it evolve? Evolution can't happen. So it's built into their system from the beginning for that to work. So it requires directing intelligence. The migratory instincts are useless unless they're perfect. I mean, you're not going to guess where you want to go. You have to know exactly where you're going to go. Navigating perfectly across only half of an ocean doesn't help. These animals were carefully created and designed with these instincts. Now, a few more here. Here's an insect, flight of an insect. Insects are the only invertebrate without backbones that are able to fly. And the wing of an insect is capable of very strong sculling action, which you wouldn't expect with an invertebrate, but it's capable of elevation, depression, fore and aft movement, pronation, and supination, so it can make all kinds of movements very quickly. Capable of changes in shape by folding and buckling. So these are quite some insects. There's many kind of insects that can do that. So many insects can hover, fly backwards or sideways, or rotate about the head or tail by using unequal wing movement. And that's some special insects like bees and wasps and flies. Not any of your favorite insects, but they exist. So here they have very small wing area. The honeybee needs small wing just to get in the beehive. But what good is a small wing when you have to fly long distances? So they can beat their wings at 200 times per second. Here's a midge. The bird has a wing beat rate of 1,046 per second. So these are amazing engineering wonders. You can see here, I mean, how can a bee like this with these short little wings, how can they fly? They got to carry all that weight with them. And here's another one. So here's some different kinds of insects. Okay, another amazing creature, the peregrine falcon. Okay, sitting on a branch here looking for his prey. He can dive down at 150 miles per hour. No, this is not just on the ground or on the water, just straight down after his prey. Hope he can stop. So iron-eating bacteria that live 10,000 feet beneath the Earth's surface. They endure pressures of 3,000 psi. We couldn't come anywhere close to that. And endures scalding temperatures of 185 degrees Fahrenheit. We can't come close to that. So these are very special creatures. Many highly complicated, intricate adaptations which completely defy evolutionary explanations. You cannot explain that by evolution, because you can't try these things and hope you gain these capabilities, because if you try it and you fail, you're not going to evolve. So how does evolution explain that? It can't. So it's ingenious design and a purpose built into it. And talking about our bodies, Ron showed that book, the body, the complexity of the human body. And these birds, they have different complexities. All these creatures we talked about, they're different. But all of our bodies are very, very incredibly it's a mystery to us. We're finding out more, of course, but still a lot is unknown to us. And then we come to the human body. We have 75 plus maybe even 60 trillion cells in our bodies. Everyone has slightly different, but it's in that order of magnitude. And a cell, what does one cell look like? Well, here's the complexity. Okay, it's got all these parts here. It's got the chromosomes, it's got nucleus, and it has the the cover as well around everything that is inside the cell. So you can't have a broken shell. The shell has to protect everything that's in it. And every cell, we have about 200 different kinds of cells in our bodies, but they're all that complex. And everyone carries all the information necessary to reproduce to the next generation. Very, very complex. So how do we examine it? Well, in Darwin's day, of course, he could not examine it. He had no idea the complexity of the body. He had no idea about the DNA. We didn't learn about the DNA till 1953. So Darwin knew nothing about that. So some people would say, and I would agree, that if Darwin was living today, he would never come up with his theory. It would never fly. And many people tried to support his theory, but there are holes in his theory, very large holes, that make it impossible. So how can we look at the cell? Well, as humans, with our eyes, we can see some aspects, up to these like 1 millimeter. But then a light microscope, but with the electron microscope, you can look at the complexity down to the DNA and viruses, bacteria. Okay, so now we know a lot about the cells, in different living organisms, but Darwin had none of this. And of course, one of the more complex organs that we have is our eyes. Our eyes is, like it says, staggeringly complex. There aren't many organs that are this complicated. How would you explain that by step-by-step random mutation and selection? Darwin himself wrote in his book, Origin of Thesis, that he couldn't imagine how this could happen, how this could evolve step by step. And yet, later on, he said, well, there must be in some way. What's his explanation? Well, we're here, aren't we? We got the eye, so it must have. But no, there is no way to explain that. So just look at the complexity of the eye here, with the retina, the lens, the cornea, the pupil, the muscles that hold it together, and of course your eyelid, which closes over it, your eyelids goes up and down, of course, optic nerve going out the back. So all of these pieces are part of the eye. How could that possibly have evolved? There's no way to imagine how that could have happened. So the things that you can do with your eye, automatic aiming, focusing, aperture adjustment. If I look here and then I look at the back of the room, I've got to adjust. Functions from almost complete darkness to bright sunlight. Even if you turn the lights off in a room, your eyes adjust and you can start to recognize some things. So it's very, very complex. We can see a fine hair. We make about 100,000 separate motions per day. How does that work? How do you keep your eye working? It could get dry, or you get tired of. Fortunately, these are involuntary movements. You don't have to think about it. But it provides us a continuous series of color stereoscopic pictures. There are some people that are colorblind, but most of us can see and distinguish between very small changes in the colors of a picture. And all this, of course, the eye just keeps on working. Okay? The eye works in a baby when it's first born. The first few weeks, he can start to see things. And at our age, we can see fine. Many of us need glasses, of course, to help, but nevertheless, we can still see. So it's all performed without complaint. So, and of course, when we go to sleep, the eye is maintained. Hopefully it remains closed, and there is maintenance which occurs while we sleep. Some more features, complex, sophisticated. Scientists today, even now, don't understand how all its functions. Requires sophisticated synchronization of complex structures and mechanisms. The eye would be useless unless fully developed. I mean, if I didn't have a lens, it wouldn't work. Just missing one of those pieces, and it wouldn't work. It's all got to be there. So piecemeal evolution of the human eye is a completely unreasonable notion. The probability of chance formation is 1 in 10 to the power of 266. In other words, 1 followed by 266 zeros. That probability is small, mathematically so small that it's impossible. So what did Charles Darwin have to say when he wrote the book Origin of Species? Here's what he says: to suppose that the eye, with all its inimitable contrivances for adjusting the focus to different distances, for admitting different amounts of light, and for the correction of spherical and chromatic aberration, could have been formed by natural selection. That's what his theory, natural selection could deal with changes, seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest possible degree. The belief that an organ as perfect as the eye could have formed by natural selection is more than enough to stagger anyone. Well, it staggered Darwin too, but they didn't let that stop. He said eventually he came to realize that, well, it probably happened because we've got it, don't we? So more than the human eye. Here's another evolution. It says, my last doubt concerns so-called parallel evolution. Even something as complex as the eye has appeared several times. For example, there are other animals that have eyes as well, but they've developed differently. We talk about the trilobite, for example, which is now extinct, but it has a very strong lens, it turns out, but it's different from our eyes. So even some complex as the eye appeared several times, for example, in the squid, the vertebrates, the arthropods. It's bad enough accounting for the origin of such things once, but the thought of producing them several times makes my head swim. Frank Salisbury. And here, examination of the eye is a cure for atheism. Amen. Okay, we'll talk about the trilobite eye. Well, it's now extinct. It's a very small, animal, more like a fish that lived in the bottom of the ocean. But trilobite lenses, they are preserved in the fossil record. So we still have some kind of a structure we can see in those eyes. It has a double lens design. Our human eye is single lens. So even back then, it's very, very complex. So there's 100 to 15,000 lenses in each eye in the trilobite. It could see underwater without distortion. I mean, you can imagine that many lenses involved. There'd be nothing that would be distorted. We don't have that capability. The implicit knowledge of Abe's sign law, this is a law of nature. It obeys that law, Fermat's principle, and other principles of optics are inherent in the design of these lenses. So these are laws that we didn't know about, the scientists didn't know about, but now we know what those laws, how they work, and this trilobite eye already worked according to those laws. So we would say it's carefully designed by the knowledgeable physicist. And here's a somewhat hard to read picture here, but anyway, you can see here all the pieces are very, the lenses and the structure is very, very intricate, and this is magnified many times. Okay, so to do with this, You may have heard the term Darwin's black box. What is that? Well, that's a theory that he came up with, which is very important for in the area of design. He showed that the cell, he called that Darwin's black box, because Darwin couldn't see in that box, and we can't see in it with our naked eye either. It's filled with irreducibly complex molecular machines that could not be built by natural selection. Lots of big words. What does that mean? Irreducibly complex means whatever part is required. If something requires 10 different parts, they all need to be there and working together. Okay, so my eye wouldn't work without a lens. Okay, all the parts need to be there or else it doesn't work. And so he uses a simple example. I guess that's the next slide. But here is, you may not know it and you can't feel it, but there are motors in your cells. And here's what they look like under the microscope, something like this. You can recognize something that looks a gear-like. That's how we would build a motor. Okay, that's in your cells. And here they are. They can apparently go thousands of times per second in one direction and then stop on a dime and go the other direction. It's remarkable, and you can't feel any of that, fortunately, but they're working in your body, in your cells. So we have over 100 molecular motors that we know exist inside the cell with very specific analogies to human-designed motors. And you could see some human kind of designs in this as well. So what's his insight? Well, he contends, Michael Behe is a well-known ID person, intelligent design person, works out of with the Discovery Institute here in Seattle. Michael Behe contends that when we look at the protein machines that run cells, there is a point at which no parts can be removed. Remember that picture in the last slide? If you remove one of those parts, that motor wouldn't work and still have a functioning machine. He called these machines irreducibly complex. In other words, you can't reduce it down to fewer parts than is required for working. So irreducibly complex, that's the technical term. So we encounter irreducibly complex devices in everyday life. A simple mousetrap is an example of an irreducibly complex device. So here's one you can understand. Okay, well, what do you need for a mousetrap? You need a board, you need a hammer, you need a spring, you need a trigger like that, you need a bait holder, and a staple. Those parts, you need all of those. If you removed one of those parts, you would catch no mice at all. So that's what we mean by irreducibly complex. All the parts need to be there. See anything missing there? How about the cheese? You do have to have cheese, but then you have to put that in there. That doesn't come with a mousetrap. So anyway, you need all the parts there for it to work. And then here, bacterial motors as well. They can move in one direction, or they can be stationary. They can also move in other directions, and forward motion, backward motion, lots of different options. Certain bacteria swim by means of rotary flagella. Okay, and here's looking at the parts in a little bit more detail. But again, you can see the picture here. The rod, the drive shaft, the studs, rotor, etc. So this is what is needed. This is much more complex, of course, than a mousetrap, but nonetheless, you need all of these parts. You take one away, it doesn't work. Okay, here's one that you're familiar with, I'm sure, the metamorphosis of the butterfly, starting with a caterpillar leg, they go into a chrysalis, and then eventually into a butterfly. How could that evolve? Where would it start? You start with a caterpillar. How does it know where to go? I mean, the program needs to be in that caterpillar to do all this. So I'm going to show you a few pictures of that, but also I'm going to show you woodpecker and bombardier beetle, which are very complex living organisms you may have heard of. And I'm going to cheat. When Dr. Gish was alive, I think I met him at a conference about 15, 20 years ago. He showed some of this activity. And I said, can I borrow that to show people? And he said, yes, you can do that. So he's graciously let me borrow that. And so this provides overwhelming, strong proofs of intelligent, benevolent design that lie around us, the atheistic idea so nonsensical that I cannot put it into words, a British physicist. So let me, I'm going to do something here. Let's see. I'm not going to tell you how I did this, but okay. So here's a woodpecker. What's so special about the woodpecker? What's unique? You'll know if you're outside and you hear the woodpecker, and how can he do that? You know, his beak into the wood for all these times and very quickly, and it has these special, you know, toes to hang on to the wood. You can see the curved toenails there. And so what also that he has, you know, why is he pecking on the wood? He wants to get some bug in the wood. So how do he get the bug? He's got a long tongue that sticks out like this. And so he reaches into the wood, and that wood, that is within his body, in his head. So how does he get that out of his mouth and catch the bug? You know, that is unexplainable. Okay, then we come to the butterfly, you know, starting with this caterpillar. It goes through these different stages, okay? And you can see the gradual changes, the pupa, the chrysalis there, and then you see different features gathering on there. And then the butterfly finally comes out of that. And here it is. How did that happen? You know, how could that evolve? What did it evolve from? There's no way to explain that. You may have heard about the bombardier beetle, and many people heard about that, what it can do. Yeah. So it is, you know, a fairly large beetle, very strong armor on top, but you know, he can go. Frogs, for example, would like to eat beetles, so the frogs will come and try and catch them. So how does he defend against those frogs? Well, here he is, bombardier beetle. He just shoots out the back a poison that, you know, here's an ant, but he can also do that with a frog. The poison stops the predator right there. He can't go any further. So where does that come from? Well, he's got two sacs of poisonous material that have to be combined to produce this, what he shoots out the back. So, because if they were combined in his body, it would blow him up. Okay, and so here he can do it not just backwards but also forwards, if there's a predator out in front like that. And here he comes up to a frog, and that stops the frog dead. He backs off. So that was quite a remarkable animal as well. So let me bring us back to the original now. Okay, so we came from this year. And now evolution can't explain any of this. And that there are other things which we haven't covered at all, like beauty, you know, different colors. That apparently there are living creatures in the bottom of the sea which have all kinds of colors with them. Where does that come from? And why is it there? So it's exhibited by some fish deep in the sea. how do you explain mimicry? How did it develop? One type of organism imitates or mimics another type. I showed you some examples of that up front with the fish and the birds. The spiders disguising as ants, you know, with 8 legs. It makes it look like it's 6 legs. The angler fish, which I showed you, convergence, similar organisms and structures. There are sonar systems in the bat and porpoise. So they all have sonar systems. Wing mechanisms evolve separately in insects and bats, flying reptiles and birds. They all fly differently. I mean, they can't evolve from one to another through random chance mutation. There has to be design involved in that. So there's no evolutionary mechanism that can explain that. So what have we learned? Well, looking at these creatures, any evidence that creatures evolved? I see none. Do creatures appear to be designed? Yes, because if they didn't have all those features, they wouldn't work. They couldn't do what they're designed to do. So then if they're designed, then by whom or by what? So I believe God is the designer and creator of all these incredible creatures. So is evolution really true? I would say no. I did a talk earlier this week, one that's out on the internet, and it's called 5 Challenges to the Theory of Evolution, and all of them show that evolution is not possible at all. It's a little bit more scientific than I've showed you here, but it's out on the net for those that want to look at that. God's creatures, they are created. Creation requires a creator. God is that creator, and creatures are designed, cannot be explained by evolution, are designed for a purpose, and God created creatures for our enjoyment. We are created by God in His image to worship Him and enjoy His fellowship and enjoy what He created that we can enjoy. Now, I'm just for those that are interested, there's a lot more information available. Of course, I can point you to the main creation websites here, and all of these lectures that I do are on my website as well. I've got, I don't know, hundreds of different lectures. I'm starting to record all my lectures, and I did 2 courses recently on via Zoom, and they're all recorded. For those people who have an interest in that, just go to these websites here, and you can find that here. And this lecture will also be on the website, and it'll be on the Apologetics Forum website as well. My website is different, but we'll have it on both websites. And then here's another very interesting technical website, True Origin. You know, the questions we ask, you know, where does first life come from? How do you get first life? You know, can you explain that by random chance processes, or does it require certain designs? And then the second thing is the origin of diverse life, which is Darwinian evolution, and we believe that is false. It just doesn't work. Okay, and these are, I mentioned Michael Behe, and there's a doctor who has a set of videos. We may even have a few in the back there, but on incredible creatures, and he covers a bunch of them in a lot more detail than we've covered them here. And then there's Bruce Malone. He's one of our speakers. He's going to be here in November. And here's the 3 books that his colleagues have written. Inspired Evidence, Have You Considered, Without Excuse. These are 3 books that he's written over the last 15 years and have many examples of designed organisms and asking the question, could it be evolved or designed? And we have those 3 books on the back table as well for those that are interested. So that's it. God's creatures are indeed incredible, designed and created by God. So, thank you for your attention. We have some time for questions. Barry, if you could pick up the microphone, and anybody that wants to ask a question or tell me I'm wrong, just give the microphone to Barry, and we'll. Barry?
Heinz, in talking about the bird migrations, do the migrations change? And like, how would, like before the flood, did birds migrate? And then after the flood, how did they know where to go after the whole land has changed?
Yeah. Somebody could interpret. My hearing is not the best, so if somebody could interpret that, what you're.
She asked you, Heinz. She asked how the birds migrate before the flood versus after the flood.
Oh, well, they didn't have to migrate during the flood, right? Because they're the ones. Well, there'd be birds outside as well. Yeah, I'm not sure we have any information on that. I mean, how it changed after the flood from before the flood. Is that your question? Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, your question. Yeah. I don't think we have any. Because of course, we had fewer birds on the ark, the ones that had to be there. But I believe there's also birds that were outside. Despite the awful weather outside. Yeah. Over there.
You said the whale bones were disproved, the ones that showed that they had arms and were showed to have evolved over time. Do you have papers that show like how it was debunked?
Somebody explain that. I have trouble hearing that.
The whale bones, the whale bones ones, you said it was debunked?
What, I mean, the whale evolution?
Yes,
yeah.
That's one of the bigger ones, as well as the other one that had the fossils. Yeah. I also saw one that said that they haven't found humanoids that were older, fossilized, but yet, like on the news and stuff, you'll see that they actually found in caves and stuff earlier, like creation version of ourselves, which was pretty cool. But the whalebone one, I'm curious, just because that one has been gone over a lot. So do you have anything that shows like how you disproved it or anything such?
Yeah, there is a lot written about that. Jonathan Sarfetti from CMI, Creation Ministries International, he's got 2 books out on refuting evolution and refuting evolution number 2. And these are, I exchange information from people from the other side, and I said there's no evidence for, evolution of the whale and, a bunch of others like that. But he pointed me to some articles, but there's no evidence there. I mean, it is made up because they believe it happened, so they got to find something to connect it all. Yeah, but Jonathan has written very good descriptions of those issues. He's also written a book called The Greatest Hoax on Earth. Richard Darwin wrote a book, The Greatest Show on Earth, where he believes in evolution, and he explained why. And then Jonathan Sarfetti, he wrote a book 1 year later saying, The Greatest Hoax on Earth, addressing all of his descriptions.
Do you have these links on your website, perhaps?
I believe we have some of those books there. There's also, what's it called? The HEALS. There's 15 PhD scientists that wrote a book together in their areas of expertise showing that evolution does not work. And that book we have there, we also have DVD on that. And so those the whale evolution Horse evolution is another one. You know, they make assumptions that they can't prove. So both of those just do not work.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, if there are no more questions, we can move on, and I'll be available to answer any more questions you have. But another chance, is anybody else that wants to ask one? Okay, well then let me close out this session then. Got a few notes here. So Rick, if we could bring up the last slide there. Rob Carter is he's a scientist with ICR, CMI, Creation Ministries International, out of Georgia, and so he's been here a number of times. And as I showed you, there's a schedule. He's going to be speaking at 9 different places. We bring him to 2 Christian schools in the area, and we bring him to 6 different churches this time. So he's got a lot of different talks, a lot of different titles. The one that he's going to speak on here is it's called the historical Adam. Why do we believe that Adam is a real person, real God-created person, rather than evolved from some previous living organism like ape-like creature or chimps or whatever. So he's done a lot of DNA work. You know, we can use DNA to show the changes from one generation to the next. You know, we are actually, if you look at it, we are actually devolving. We're not evolving, get it better. We are getting devolving. Every generation, we pass on mutations to our next generation. So, and there's a bunch of books out on things like that as well. So he's going to speak on that topic. He's got a degree in genetics and marine biology and genetics. He spends most of his time doing research on genetics and DNA, and he's written a lot of articles that you will find of interest. So take a look at the list of talks he's got there. And of course, you can always go to the website, apologeticsforum.org, and you can, under events, click on upcoming Apologetics Forum events, and they're all listed there. And if you click on them, you'll get all the details of the talk, where it's going to be given, and an overview of the talk as well. So take advantage of that. So there are more flyers in the back table. Remember the ICR Acts and Facts book that this one here. We do have a few extras back there, so take advantage of that. And you can sign up to get more if you like. There are refreshments available there, some cookies and coffee and tea. And also, remember the specials on DVDs. Buy one DVD, you get the second one free. And, okay, and the way we support the ministry, of course, is through donations. And we have some boxes in the back as you can donate there. Or if you care to donate online and want a receipt for your donation, we have a donate button on our website. Just go through that, PayPal, and we can take it there as well. So we do thank you for your support, because without your support, we wouldn't be doing this. We wouldn't be bringing all these speakers in, and I hope you're getting a lot out of it. So yes? I'm sorry, I didn't.
Why have some animals died out?
Oh, why? Why have animals not died out? Or,
Why are some extinct?
Yeah, well, they do go extinct. You know, like the dinosaurs, many of those have gone extinct. because of change in environment, like the flood. I mean, that's a major change in the environment. And so there are animals that went extinct during the flood. But even now, some are going extinct, because animals are devolving. We're not getting better. That's the main explanation. Okay, so let me just close in a word of prayer, and then we'll be dismissed. Father, we thank you for this time. We thank you for the audience here and the support they've given us for this ministry. And we ask you just to bless each one of us here that attended, and that they could share what they've learned with others. And we just pray, Lord, that you would just prepare Carter for his visit here too among us next month. And we just thank you for that. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.